I was rinsing soap off the old Silverado when the trouble finally stepped into the sunlight. Two guys in bright safety vests, reflective stripes winking like they owned the road, and the kind of confidence you only see on people who mistake fear for authority. They smiled like meter maids, flashed something shiny at the end of a lanyard, and said the word that makes decent people hesitate: inspection. My first thought wasn't fear. It was the way Lena's shoulders went tight behind me, like a bird tensing before a storm, and I knew that even on a quiet street in Cedar Run, Arizona, some storms don't wait for clouds. We'd moved out here to be ordinary, to let the desert teach us how to slow down. A baker who can tell the time by the swell of dough. I'm a guy who has learned to live with hypervigilance the way some people live with a bum knee, mostly fine, sometimes clicking when the weather changes. A few small things had been off the past week. The doorbell cam blinking dead, even though the battery was fresh, a gray sedan rolling past the house too slow, a set of boot prints on the side yard where there shouldn't be prints at all, and yesterday someone had left a little pink citation under our wiper blade with a line about unauthorized exterior color variants, which would have been good for a laugh if our neighborhood actually had an HOA. It didn't. That was the point. Morning. The bearded one said, stocky, forearms like rope, beard trimmed to a point. I'm Jax, this is Rook. Cedar Run Estates Homeowners Authority. We've got some compliance issues to clear up. Lena stepped forward, hair tucked into a kerchief dusted with flour from the morning's batch, and gave them the smile she uses for customers who try to haggle on sourdough. There's no homeowners association on this street, she said, voice even, not hostile, just unwilling to pretend. They exchanged a glance that didn't need subtitles. Rook tilted his head at the house like it was a misbehaving dog. Ma'am, that decorative fence exceeds approved height by 8 inches. Also, unapproved gravel in the median, and that mailbox isn't yours, I said, drying my hands on a rag that smelled like soap and engine. So you can take that clipboard, walk back to your car, and leave us to our Saturday. The bearded one Jax held up his lanyard, the little badge catching sunlight, all eagles and shields in a font that wants to be taken seriously. I've seen real badges, the way they sit with weight, the way the shine looks earned and not sprayed on, and this wasn't it. I didn't want a scene, didn't want neighbors peeking through blinds or turning their phones into little courtroom windows, but I also wasn't going to let two strangers play dress-up on my driveway. Sir, Jack said, shifting to a lower register. Non-compliance comes with penalties, and we're within our authority to post notice and issue fines. He flicked a glance at Lena like she was the soft spot, and my jaw did that old click I try to keep to myself. Post away, I said. And when you're done, take a photo of yourself trespassing so the sheriff has an easier day. He smiled without humor. You sure you want to make this hard? There's a special temperature you feel right before a bad thing happens. It isn't heat or cold, more like all the air in the room is waiting. Lena must have felt it too, because she slid her hand into mine, a tiny squeeze, a reminder that the decisions I make aren't mine alone anymore. She started to pivot toward the front door, just to put distance between talk and trouble, when Jax's hand flashed out and caught her elbow. I didn't shout, didn't lunge, didn't do any of the things that make clips go viral. I just stepped between them and put my palm on his wrist, a simple correction like you'd make to a kid reaching for a hot pan. Let go, I said, and he did, but not before pushing off just enough to send Lena backward, her heels skidding across a bit of loose gravel, hip kissing the curb, a tiny involuntary sound escaping her that I've never heard and never want to again. Pain has its own pitch, and this one was high and shocked. Time stretches in moments like that. Not slow, exactly, but thick, and in it I saw Rook's right hand drift toward his vest, not casual, and the shape under the fabric was wrong for a phone. I placed my body so I was a door that wouldn't open, counted the steps to the foyer where our small safe sits behind the coat rack, and thought, not yet. Buddy, Rook said, the word too sweet. We're just doing our job. Which job is that, intimidation or theft? I said, keeping my voice level, because people confuse volume with power. Last chance. Walk. Then Lena did something that would have made me laugh on any other day. She reached into her apron pocket like a magician and came out with the little can of pepper spray she carries after an ugly incident at the bakery last year. Her hand shook, but not enough to miss. And in one clean burst, the space between us was a mist of orange that hit both men like a truth they didn't want. Jax cursed, grabbed his face. Rook staggered, eyes streaming, and I took the beat we'd begged for, crossed the 3 strides to the door, and keyed the safe. There's a line no one wants to cross in a neighborhood where kids ride scooters, and someone's always flipping burgers. It's the line where you bring a weapon into the daylight, where you choose clarity over the delusion that proximity makes you safe. I didn't want that line, but I wasn't going to leave my wife on the ground while 2 men with counterfeit authority recovered their nerve. I came back with the rifle I never brag about, stock tight to shoulder, muzzle down, safety on, feet set not to show force but to show balance, and in a calm I wish I didn't own I told them, hands visible. Get on the ground. Do not reach. We're calling the police. If justice were as simple as a command, there'd be no news. Rook's hand slipped, and in that slip I saw metal, not a toy, not a bluff, something narrow and mean, and Jax, blinking through the sting, had started angling toward the gray sedan I'd seen idle past our house all week. They weren't going to submit. They were going to flee and return later with the kind of courage that comes from thinking you've been wronged by someone who refused to be a victim. Don't, I said, dialing 911 with my offhand, feeding the dispatcher the address, the uniforms, the threat, the injury, the fact that I was armed, the statement that I did not want to shoot anyone. The operator's voice was patient and professional, sirens already a thread in the distance, and that was the moment Jax barked, "We're out," and dragged Rook toward the car. Choices define us as much as history does. I could let them go, hope the license plate wasn't fake, trust that they wouldn't come back after dark for the tools in the garage or the fear in my wife's eyes. Or I could make sure the car didn't move, not by firing at people I didn't, but by taking the car out of the equation entirely. There are folks who'll argue the law from their armchairs, who'll tell you what restraint looks like when they've never stood on concrete with the woman they love gasping through pain. And I get it, I do. But in that split second I made a decision I'll stand by in court or heaven. I put 6 rounds into steel and rubber, clean and controlled the mirror, the front quarter panel, the hood where it would bleed coolant, the front left tire, the rear windshield, the trunk above the latch in the sedan. Gave up the ghost with a hiss and a cough. Jax and Rook hit the asphalt with their palms out like they'd practiced it, cursing, crying, all the means scrubbed off their voices by pain and surprise. I stayed put, kept the rifle pointed at the driveway, kept my mouth running with the dispatcher so there was a living record of everything I did and didn't do. Lena was on her side, breathing in short little sows, hand pressed to her rib, and between each of my words I slipped in a word to her, "With you, almost here, I've got you," like stringing beads to keep sanity together. Sirens cut the street clean, blue and red washing over stucco and succulents, and the oddest thing in the world is how quiet a neighborhood gets when law arrives. Officers did their work like choreography commands, cuffs, the long, careful slide of a weapon from under a vest, the yellowed counterfeit badges in a Ziploc, the phone one of them had been recording on because of course he had, and then the paramedics kneeling next to Lena with that special blend of tenderness and speed that makes you want to cry and volunteer in the same breath. At the station, the statements felt like a second interrogation by life. Tell it again, and again, and again, because truth becomes stronger when it's repeated without embroidery. I called a friend, a straight arrow attorney named Nora Pike who used to try cases for the Navy before she started defending people like me, and she told me 2 things that steadied me better than coffee. Stay simple, and don't fill silence with speculation. So I told them what I told you, no shots fired at people, only at the car to prevent flight, an assault on my wife in my own driveway, the recovered knife, and the hidden handgun the officers found wedged under the sedan's driver's seat like a third lie, and the counterfeit HOA badges that would have been funny if they hadn't been scary. The part that felt like a movie I wouldn't watch happened a week later when Detective Ramos, quiet eyes and the patience of a chess player, came by with an update. They'd squeezed Rook, who folded faster than a camp chair, said the whole thing had been engineered by a man named Martin Vale, president of something called a Neighborhood Improvement Council that didn't exist on paper, a real estate hustler with cold hands who'd been trying to scare holdouts on our street into listing cheap, buy low, flip high, move on before anyone connected the prayer candles to the arson. Texts on his phone drew lines between our mailbox violations, the stage citations, even a bar napkin covered in bullet points about which houses had elderly owners, which had cameras, which had vocal wives circled ours with a little dollar sign, because of course he had. I thought knowing the puppeteer would make me feel safer, but there's a special rage that comes with realizing the thread in front of you had an office and a smile. Nora kept me off comment threads, off the news clips where I was labeled a hero in one corner and a danger in another, and she kept me focused on the only courtroom that mattered, the one where facts are heavier than opinions. There were questions. Of course, should a man with training have done less? Was disabling the vehicle proportionate? Could I have retreated and let men who had already hurt my wife leave freely? And I answered as carefully as I live. I did not shoot at a person. I disabled an instrument of escape to prevent further harm or return. I acted on my property after an assault and a visible weapon. I called the police before anything else. I stopped when the threat stopped. The jury heard words like castle, imminent, reasonable. And while I don't love legal poetry, I can tell you it sounds different when you're sitting next to a person you've vowed to keep safe. The courtroom brought its own theater. Rook on the stand, eyes down, saying Vale had paid cash and told them to look official because people fold when they hear the word fines. Jack's trying to hold dignity like a wet cat, bristling, then breaking when Ramos laid out a map of our block with a web of dates, posts, and payments that put him in our cul-de-sac more times than neighborhood kids with chalk. And then Vale himself in his polished shoes, insisting he was a community man, letters to the editor, photos with ribbon cuttings, and the slow reveal of his texts make them nervous, paper their windshield. If the husband postures, remind him of penalties, each one read aloud in a courtroom where even the AC sounded embarrassed. In the end, the DA dropped everything against me. No charges, no probation, just a lawyerly reminder that restraint had saved lives and that not everyone with my training remembers the word restraint when adrenaline's eating the clock. Jax and Rook took their medicine: assault, impersonation, attempted robbery, and Vale, who thought he was too smooth to hold, found himself facing conspiracy and solicitation counts that don't look good on a brochure. You'd think the gavel would cure the ache, but life isn't tidy, and healing is less like light switches and more like dimmers you adjust every day. Lena took a few weeks to sleep without guarding her ribs with her palm, and I took a few weeks to stop checking the window twice an hour. We relearned small habits: locking the side gate without turning it into a ritual of fear, taking the dog out after dark without broadcasting our schedule, waving at neighbors without scanning their hands first. Our block threw a cookout because that's what blocks do when they want to pretend things are normal: burgers, kids with popsicles, a folding table covered in potato salad, and it was awkward, and then it wasn't, and sometimes that's all you get. I hung a small carved piece of cedar above the safe inside the foyer, a thing I made with my own hands because making is different from buying, and on it I burned 5 words. This home keeps its promises. Not a threat, not a dare, just a statement of how we mean to live: eyes open, kindness first, lines clear, and if you come wearing false authority and hungry hands, you will meet the truth where it stands. Some neighbors think that's too much, that I should be more forgiving, and others think I didn't do enough. That 6 shots into a car is what restraint looks like only to people who've never fired one. And somewhere between those opinions, we keep our porch light on and our doorbell cam charged and our Saturdays as ordinary as we can manage. There's a final thing I'll tell you, because it's the part that changed me more than any verdict. All week before those men showed up, I'd felt the itch between my shoulders, the old instinct that makes you skin rooftops and listen for footsteps that aren't yours, and I kept telling myself not to be dramatic. Don't spook the neighborhood. Don't turn your marriage into a bunker because of a few cigarette butts and a slow sedan. Lena saw it different. She said the quiet can lie, that a fake badge is still a mask, and a mask is never worn by accident, and she was right. You don't have to live paranoid to live prepared, but you do have to trust the person you love when they say, "I smell rain," even if the sky is jealous blue. So here we are, back on the driveway, hose hissing, sun climbing, a Saturday that's earned its peace. Not everyone will agree with what I did, and that's honest. Maybe you see a line I crossed, maybe you see one I held, maybe you've got your own story about a person who tried to scare you into paying a debt you didn't know. Tell me where you stand. Tell me if you think I was right or wrong or stuck in a bad set of options. Tell me how your town handles power that shows up with a fake smile and a clipboard. Drop a comment with your take on justice, restraint, and what home really means. Share it, argue it, pull it apart. I'm listening. And I bet our whole street is too.